Let's talk herd. Yeah, and I think probably we're kind of more hard on ourselves as well with our own, the animals that we look after in our own lives. And yeah, it always really resonates with me though that their generosity of spirit and their just the way they're so nonchalant about things, like they're not hung up really on things. And I think the horses that are like that have kind of absorbed that a bit from their environment and their guardians, they can't really communicate that well. It's like that blocks their voice, really, their kind of personality from coming through. So,
well, our domestic horses, they're having a lot of the same experiences we are, and they're in order to adapt and cope, they start to operate maybe on a more superficial level as well, right? And like these
yeah,
muscles, even for I think any being, of being in touch with intuition and higher spirit and the universal wisdom, they can lose touch with it as well.
yeah,
And if you're in an environment where it's a healthier herd, maybe, and humans are more open to exploring this dimension with them, we're all exercising those muscles a little bit more.
definitely.
So I do think it's maybe a little dangerous sometimes that we assume all horses are, able to channel all of this
Yeah,
easily or communicate it, because I think many of them struggle too. Like we're all in this
absolutely. Yeah.
muck together.
Yeah, no, I think that's really true. And I really believe strongly that the horses are like us in that they become institutionalized quite deeply, quite
Mm.
profoundly. And they do need to go through quite a process of almost reigniting their own sense of
Mm.
self and their own choice and their own, and those horses are always going to be a little bit different from the ones who never were institutionalized in that same way. And yeah, I mean, you do have to be careful because if you only ever were around those horses who are quite, just shot down, to use that phrase that people talk about, you wouldn't really know
Mm-hmm.
what they can be like, and when they're fully present and fully alive, and also not like Karamba is my I always call her. I have to stop calling her a youngster because she's not that young anymore. But she's 12, 11, 12, and she is very uninhibited. Like, um, she doesn't like any kind of doctoring, any kind of, so she's got these patches on her tummy, and sometimes she did tell me that she doesn't want anything on them. So, and I usually just accept that, but I happen to have some coconut oil that I was putting on Totty, and so I was just rubbing her tummy, and I just kind of rubbed a bit on. And she got like, when she realized, she got really angry. Like, so funny. And it's so rare for her as well to show that side of herself, but she can be like a real
Mm.
dragon. But she doesn't
Mm.
shut that part of her is completely alive and healthy. And, she doesn't, there's no sense of her having been trained not to be like that. So it's quite different than with, other horses. There's some
I have one. I have one.
yeah. So sometimes I wonder if, because the others aren't, most of the others just don't have that, that limit, that boundary. And you wonder, is it because it's been sort of squeezed out of them? Yeah.
Yeah, I've asked that question a lot because I have one that way also who was born and raised
Yeah.
here. So I know, what her life experience has been, and always was encouraged to have her opinions
Yeah.
and voice. But I think where I am on that right now, and we explore that a lot in my experiential learning program with the horses, is that there is the conditioning, obviously, that they have in the domestic world, which we have too, right? They're
Absolutely.
experiencing a lot of that. But there is also, just like with us, innate personality. So some people are just more in tune with that inner voice, and it's harder to have it shut down.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, just their makeup. And then others are so sensitive that it takes very little for them to shut that down.
Yeah.
Right. And so again, I think there's not really one answer, but to recognize that we can be all over the spectrum for various reasons.
Yeah. It's almost like a horse is like a being is so complex in a way. Like there's so many and so
Just
unique.
like us.
Yeah. So you can't sort of, there's no way of categorizing really. And I think there's probably, like, even to the extent of that, there will probably be horses who are able to let a lot of their past go, and it doesn't affect them, and then other ones that tend to hold on, and we just have to not worry too much, I think, about those things. I think the main thing for me is that we can, as human beings, begin to just perceive horses as equals. I think that's so powerful. And I think that's probably the biggest difference. It's not so much that those who don't are aware that they don't. It's almost like a big, massive blind spot. So there's so many things that they love doing with horses, and they love, in a way, using horses for, that they just can't really explore that. And so it's like they don't really even think about it. But when you do start, to really be able to take that on, then it does change everything.
It changes everything. The layers of that are really deep, because part of what I do is work with people who want to start listening to the horses.
Yeah.
And there's so much in the human world that, and I think horses are more aware than we think of what we're going through in those situations, in that maybe they board their horse and don't have a lot of control. Maybe all of their friendships, would go by the wayside, and they would be isolated, and maybe the human would fall into despair if the layers to it. And I think, in my experience, there's a lot. I want to use the word joy, but maybe it just means everything to the horse and the human if they can see each other, even if they can't change their circumstances.
Absolutely, yeah.
The more we can say. So, and part of that, back to the ownership, part of that is, when I'm with my horses, is this acknowledgement that we're in this relationship where I am the owner and they are the owned. And yet, can we both come to that without feeling sorry for ourselves in either way?
Yeah.
Because being an owner sucks, honestly. A lot of times it's hard. I don't know how to make the right choices. Right?
Yes.
And even though it's hard for them not to be able to make their own choices, I think they also feel that and understand that it's hard for me to try to figure out how to make the right choices. And so there's that equalness of being like, it's hard for both of us in different ways.
And maybe if you sort of start to see it, that there isn't really an owner and an owned, there's just us. And then, because then it sort of shifts, it's almost like there's then a kind of mutual responsibility. And I know that you could say, oh, well, the horses aren't the ones that are finding the hay and all that kind of stuff. But in a way, if you consider it in a different way, like if you somehow dissolve those perceptions, then it sort of does become more like what comes into my mind was Emily, the Swedish girl she's got a lot of horses, and she said it in one, I don't know where I read it, or if I think she said it in the podcast, that one of her horses, or what a lead mare, decides the grazing. Like, she will decide where they go, or I don't think we talked about it, and my horses are quite, they will choose, like for example, recently I didn't know when to rest one of the fields, the big field that we used to take hay from, and I was like, because I quite like them just doing it themselves and figuring it out themselves, but it's better if it does get to rest. So I was kind of like wasn't really doing anything. I was just waiting sort of for something to happen. And then one day, and I'd have been resting another little field, which is beside. And so one day they all came over, and they were so high energy. They were like, they obviously wanted something, and they wanted to go in that little field. So I realized I could just open that and close the other one. I mean, literally, physically, with the gate. And it just sort of solved the problem. And it was them, really, who made the decision. And they were absolutely right. So I think, in a way, it just, it's baby steps, but it's like still nevertheless changing our reality. And also, like, another example is that Karamba has decided that she just doesn't want her front feet trimmed, not her back ones so much, but her front ones. She just doesn't want it done, and it would, I'm just not prepared to fight with her. So I just sort of accept that. I don't even really know why. And they are like, it's amazing the process of how they're chipping themselves off, and they're, finding the right balance. And so, yeah, I feel like the more that you kind of give room or give that potential, allow there to be a potential of a shift in the ownership, or a shift in the responsibility a little bit, just even in the way you think about it, then it starts to happen a little bit.
I love both of those stories. And one thing I've learned to do is, when it is a strong opinion, like your mare saying that about her front feet.
Yeah.
When it's a consistently strong opinion, then I'm like, oh, there's some bigger message here, and we don't necessarily know what it is. There's something going on in her body, or I don't, who knows, right? But she knows something that's important to her, and maybe it's the fact of learning that they can self-trim more than you realize they can. Like, who knows what it is that's there.
Yeah.
But, and with the rotating the pastures, I struggle with that so much here too, because I don't have a big property. But there are times when I will just go out literally and sit with them and say, like, I don't know what the answer to this is, but here's what I'm struggling with from my perspective. And here's what I think you're struggling with yours. And then you just sit, like you said, don't make a decision, sit with it. And a lot of times they show me an answer I would never have come up with on my own. That is like a beautiful compromise.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's almost like
believing that they are capable.
Yeah, exactly. And you're kind of finding your way through life together, because who knows what else they could help you with if you make that shift in your sort of attitude. Like, it's like the whole thing about natural death as well. Like, I know I just used to think that that was our responsibility to kind of make that happen, when the right moment came, sort of thing. And I've completely changed my mind about that. So there's so many areas, and we just don't know what what we're just assuming all the time, I think.
And even with that one, I think it can be hard because, again, each individual is different. And I have had one horse of the two most recent that I've had pass. And I think with each one, I learned how to walk it a little more consciously. One, and he had told me already, he wanted to go a certain way, and he wanted to have that experience. And that was hard. And then
what
but
was
he wanted
that?
to be
Can
in
you
control.
share that?
And then so he's a gray horse who had the melanocytoma tumors.
Yes,
so they were benign, but he had them internal and external. And he had told me, and this is one of those messages I got that I really initially didn't even want to hear it. I was like, but I knew I wasn't making it up, because it was something that I would have never, a message I would never have given myself.
Yeah.
Which was that he was very sad that he had never known his father, or he had hundreds of siblings. This was a very well-bred show horse, and had half siblings around the world. And he had a deep sadness in him that family meant a lot to him, and he wanted to have known them in life. But somehow he knew, and I checked this later and it was true. He told me that both of his parents had died of colic, and that he wanted to go out that way because going out the same way they did would make him feel one with them. Right. And he had a couple of the tumors we knew in his intestines, deep, you could just feel one of them inside. And I thought he would pass because he could no longer pass manure.
Yeah.
I thought that was the kind of colic that would happen because one of them was very large, and I was always on the watch for this. But how it actually happened was one of his internal tumors ruptured. It was a very, very painful, but it created a colic type a response. And so it appeared as colic, believe it or not, the way that he passed. So traumatic. And then I had my older horse, Shoki, my herd elder, who I had owned for 20 years. And at the end, he asked me to help him. And what he told me was that our life together had been a partnership, and that I had worked really hard to keep his body going. Even when he lost his teeth, and I was, providing mashes and all the work, and he was so grateful. But what he said was that because we had together, he ate those mashes, so it was a partnership, right? That we had kept his body so healthy that it couldn't go through the natural process when his soul was ready. And he was in pain from arthritis and things, so he couldn't lie down anymore. The way that he couldn't bend his right. And so he asked for my help, and he said, it's not a natural death because this hasn't been a natural life in terms of that way, right? In the wild, he would have already have passed because he would have starved probably, right? Or gotten weak and then had a predator help him. So the layers to that are also very complicated. The importance is being present.
Absolutely.
And believing that together we can figure out what's the path.
Because that reminds me of what they said to me or communicated with me when I asked them about the situation of the ownership, that it really is about just being present. I mean, God, it's so overused, that word, but just every situation is different, it's unique, and we can't make rules, because even about death, you start to make rules, it has to be like this. And as your story of the second horse there reminds me of my mare Hope that I had, and oh, she was such a wonderful horse. I sort of took her on. I think we maybe swapped her for another horse with a good friend of mine in Scotland, and because she was only 3 or 4, and she was starting to be really difficult, going up on end, and just Heather couldn't cope with her, and I think she'd been sort of backed and brought on a little bit fast, you know. I mean, in a way that I just, I moved right away from that now, but that was how it was in the day. And so we kind of had this amazing relationship, and she loved her work, like the engagement dressage work that we did was like just so comforting for her. She loved that. It was like it just gave her this safe space of, just feeling powerful. And because she was quite, I don't know, she had some damage from her younger time, but she didn't have super strong joints, so she would move sound when she was being engaged, but when otherwise she wasn't that sound a horse. And so at a certain stage I decided the riding was just too much for her joints, and that was when she started to kind of go downhill a bit physically. And she was like, at a certain point she said, I need help, because, and I realized that she wasn't able to do the work to stay strong, like to stay muscular. So she'd lost all her muscle, but it was like a vicious circle. And so I did decide to have her euthanized, and her friend was there. We brought her out to be with her, and it all felt very peaceful and right. And she had asked me. Now I don't know now if I would interpret that differently, having gone through some deaths, but I think always the circumstances seem to sort of fit in with with what you're ready for and where you are and what you understand as well. It's like, at that,
completely.
yeah. So I don't think we can, I don't think you can look back and judge and say,
no. And I think that, if there's something we decide was important that we learned from that experience to go forward with, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But, and again, back to this present as we can be, and just trust that we'll make the best decisions we can if we're present. And
absolutely,
the domestic world is a very, very complicated place, and sometimes even just the fact that we're doing our best together to navigate it is enough. Like, I think about situations where I don't feel like I have power, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes when we feel powerless, the best thing is to have someone beside us who at least is just there with us, right?
Absolutely.
Can't fix it necessarily. And we just like navigate it. So don't underestimate the fact that you were just there with her, right? In the complexity of it, and try not so much to be like right or wrong, but the fact that we were there for it with each other in it, without trying to be judgmental or controlling or right. Just trying with the heart of doing the best thing.
And I think we do get a bit over attached to death and how it happens, and because I have had several experiences of the spirit coming back of the animal, and it's so powerful, and they're just so overjoyed, and they don't, all of the death bit, it's like completely immaterial from their perspective. So it's I think we get a bit over, obsessed with.
I just then had something that brought us right back to this idea of ownership and captivity, and all of that was that being alive in a physical body has so many gifts. Like, we get to experience the world through all these senses, but it also is a prison in another way, right? There are so many limitations.
Absolutely.
So we are all captive in that regard, right?
Exactly.
And we learn to live with that reality by finding the beauty of what the body allows us to experience.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a
While
really
still realizing the pain and the limitation, right? It's all
so true.
It's finding that balance of
definitely. Yeah, I love that. Just being able to see beyond the sort of, I think that is quite a human
circumstances.
Yeah, like a trait we've got where we just see like I suppose you could call it seeing things in black and white, but things aren't black and white, so it's not really reality because and it's interesting what you said when you were talking about domestic life being complicated. That is a really interesting subject because I've been watching a lot of documentaries about wild animals recently, and it is really fascinating how just the perfection of the balance of it all. Like it's almost so true and so, it's a bit like if you had ropes that were very like clean and perfectly made and they're all like binding together in this really sort of simple but elegant way. And yeah, don't like what we've sort of created is all kind of a bit more messed up than that. So it's interesting, but then there's more potential, isn't there, in that situation, like for different things to happen. Because in the wild situation, it's quite
yeah. So you just hit completely on where I've evolved to now with my business, which is coming back to that our true nature is to be at home in nature and that we are animals also. And when you say we humans see things black and white, while that's a true statement, I'm not sure that is our innate nature.
No.
I'm not sure how much of that is what we're taught in the domestic world.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I feel like horses might be here helping us with is to
definitely
reconnect with that primal wisdom of balance. And humanity has gone down this crazy weird path of exploring domestication. And what will we be as we how do I even say this? Like we have all the learning that we're doing through domestication. And then at some point be able to say more often, we could do that. We have the ability or power to do that, but we're going to intentionally choose not to because we know that tips the balance too far. Right? And that's where I think humanity, that's the lesson we have to learn is that, going into artificial intelligence and all that we're doing now, we can. But the responsibility that comes with human ability to do certain things with the balance of should we? Right? And does it disrupt the balance of this planet that we live on, right? And all the other species and the interdependency. Somehow I feel like there's this lesson and the horses are really going to play a key role in helping us find our way back to a better balance.
Definitely. And for me, it kind of feels like finding our way forward because we can't, like we said, I don't think we can go back. But then how do we, like you say, how do we go forward? But with technology, but in a way that actually embraces nature. And it's almost like we have to find a new integration. I keep thinking about these ropes and I'm feeling like there are things happening, like the way bears are coming into cities and animals are coming into our cities and changing their habits, and then maybe there's a way we can go back, like the cities can become more green again, and like just find this.
Yes.
But not necessarily going backwards, because I don't think that's possible. Like, I don't think we can
I really,
recapture.
really like what you're.
Yeah, carry on.
I really, really like what you're saying there. And that's helped me because I think even I often think about it as going back or remembering. And you're absolutely right that we can't go back. Like, there's no going back from what we've experienced. We all have to go forward and find new balance, right? And part of it is maybe the animals doing their part or nature doing its part to say, you can't just close us out, right?
No.
This is an integrated planet.
Yeah.
And then we say, so how do we now meet you given who we are today and what we are? And how do where's the compromise for both of us to figure out how to come back to a better balance together? That's beautiful.